Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I wanted to talk about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2 because we do actually have some new footage. And then I just want to talk about the show in general. I want to talk about Sophia's return and also why I do think that Season 3 of Daryl Dixon is just going to be called The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 3. And yeah, I'll get into that later on in this video. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be doing a video on Rick Grimes and Andrew Lincoln and whatnot later on, so stay tuned for that. Also, we're 44 days away until the show's premiere now, so I expect a new trailer at some point coming up very soon, like probably next week, honestly. I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, we should eventually get something soon. I mean, we're 44 days away, but I could see them potentially waiting until the 29th to like release a new trailer, like an official, like brand new trailer with a lot of new footage and whatnot. And I mean, yeah, that just makes a lot of sense. And obviously, as soon as it's like September, they're gonna be promoting the show a lot because the show's premiering at the end of the month, and that's really when you want to promote a lot of the show, right? So things are starting to pick up here a lot. I've noticed just in general a lot more interest in The Walking Dead again. I think people are starting to kind of, forget the ones who live a little bit, which I did see a lot of those complaints. I saw a lot of people saying like, can you stop talking about the ones who live, this and that, and like the ending, because like I'm so over it already. I just want to focus on like the next show, and just focus on like a newer story and whatnot. And so yeah, that's definitely very different than like a month ago where people were still pretty down on like The Walking Dead just as a whole. And I would say it's definitely getting better now, and I think people are just more excited for Daryl Dixon Season 2 here. So yeah, 44 days away, but we did get a new teaser here. And again, a lot of this stuff is just dropping on like AMC Plus or it's like cable and whatnot. And a lot of the footage that you'll get is just like footage that we've already seen before, but sometimes you'll get like these little scenes here and there that are completely brand new. And this one shot here of Carol is entirely brand new here. And we see her entering this house here. And I don't think that this is actually in America, just because of the way the scene is playing out. It honestly at this point seems like her and Ash already made it to France, and it also makes sense that it could be in America as well. I mean, I could totally see Carol just after obviously in the opening minutes we see her talk to those mechanics, and then she eventually finds where the boat's left and is like, well, Daryl is in France, so how am I going to get there? So at some point afterwards, we could see this here where she walks into the house, and then that's where she sees Ash, right? Eventually, that's how she's, going to get to France and whatnot, because he can actually fly the plane. I just think at this point here that it makes a lot more sense for Carol to be in France, or maybe I'm just wanting the scene to be in France, but I also think that it makes a lot of sense for that to actually be the case, because I think that when they first get to France, it's very much going to be them just trying to figure out, where to look first, right? Because you gotta think, when Carol first gets there, like, what is she gonna do? Like, she's not gonna find Daryl immediately. I think she's gonna try and find clues of like where he could have went, and it will be interesting to see if she finds like little things here and there that were just sort of left behind from Daryl in season 1, and she's like, okay, so he's around here, or if someone mentions something about Daryl, right? Like, I do wonder if that's going to be the case. And so her, in a shot like this where she, is just looking around in this house, makes a lot of sense to be one of the first shots of her in France. Obviously, we see when they first arrive, like in the trailer that was dropped, we saw them first arrive, and there's going to be like this like zombie attack or whatever when they first get out of the plane, but I imagine that scene's going to be like a minute or two long. They'll kill the walkers and then just end up somewhere else in France. I actually really wonder how the episode's going to play out. If like the first episode, do we see Carol in France in that episode, or do we wait until episode 2? I don't know how long these episodes are going to be, and I did hear actually that episode 1 was supposed to be about almost an hour long. I don't know if it's actually over an hour long. If the episode was about 50 something minutes, closer to 60 minutes, then I would definitely be happy with that, because I think that the episodes should be a little bit longer. I think that was my biggest complaint with The Ones Who Live, was that most of the episodes were like 40 something minutes long, right? It just felt way too short, and with the other spinoffs, like they definitely weren't that short. And so I think that, yeah, with Daryl Dixon's premiere, having it be closer to an hour makes sense, and then this way you can actually maybe have Carol show up in France in the episode. We see her taking off in the trailer, right? That's probably going to have a lot of build up to the moment. In the first 10 or 11 minutes, Carol finds out where Daryl is, basically. And so I'm trying to think of where you go next. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, you're probably going to focus on her meeting Ash and then, telling her story and whatnot. Maybe there's some flashback stuff with Sophia or whatever. I don't know if you're going to show Daryl a lot in the episode. Like, I imagine you will, because you did show him in the very opening minutes. So you're going to have to go back to the character at some point in the episode. But I just think that maybe at first you show Carol and her journey to get to France. I think in terms of an actual overall story for the first episode, that makes a lot of sense. But you also want to make, I guess, the first episode a little bit more, I don't want to say exciting, but you do want to end it on some sort of a cliffhanger. So maybe what you could do is have Carol actually get to France, do something with Daryl's storyline, but then also tease something about like the variant walkers, or like with the villain, right? Like Madame Genet. I think if you actually had something at the very end, similar to the season 1 premiere where you saw her talking with her scientists and whatnot near that boat, then obviously that would create a lot of hype for episode 2 and whatnot. And then everyone's excited because now we have this to look forward to with the variant walkers. Carol is now in France, and then we'll see where Daryl's story ends up, right? But yeah, I'm definitely very excited for this premiere. I can't wait for just like any new footage of like any kind. Like honestly, I'm so excited for just a lot of the flashback stuff with Carol as well. I mean, obviously the flashbacks, the references, the Easter eggs, that's always going to be a lot of fun. And based off a lot of the early reviews for episode 1, it seems like there's a lot of flashbacks with Carol, or it's like, I don't know if it's hallucination scenes or if it's dream sequences or what it is, but it seems like there's a lot of Carol flashback stuff. And Sophia's return, obviously, I mean, I was wondering about that a lot, I guess, before the trailer dropped. I was wondering, was she going to be actually showing up here? And it looks like, based off of the trailer, yes, she does. In terms of how it's going to be done, I've heard a lot of people say that they actually recast the part, that it's not going to be like this CGI version of like the season 2 scene, because they've done that a lot in the past where, like, obviously if you look at Michonne's like what if scenario in her final episode on The Walking Dead, they did that quite a bit there where you just had her in these different scenes, and you just, I mean, honestly, the way they did the CGI and sort of reconstructed the scene around Michonne was actually really incredible. And so, you know, obviously you see a scene like this and you're wondering, well, is this the same thing? I don't think it actually is. I think that they actually did, or at least based off of some people who have watched the episode, I don't know if it's true or not, but they may have actually recast the part. And so, yeah, I'm curious on that. I'm curious on like how they're going to handle a lot of that, because I imagine that this isn't going to be the only flashback. It's just like this one scene here, because it's going to be very cool to see, but there's going to be a point to all of this here and why Carol is starting to see Sophia around, right? And I'm just curious on like, you know, Ed's return. Are we actually going to get a flashback scene to like before the apocalypse when Carol and Ed were together, and Sophia would be a bit younger, so you'd probably have to recast for that part, right? And so Sophia's return and how that's going to affect Carol, I think, is going to be really incredible to see. That's the one thing that I haven't talked about much, but you know, it's going to be something that's really honestly incredible for Carol to, I think, just for fans mostly as well. I think to see the character go through a more emotional journey and reconnect with something that a lot of fans, you know, that was our first introduction to Carol, was just her storyline with Sophia and whatnot and what happened. And obviously that was a big storyline in season 2. And I've seen a lot of references to season 2 with this season. And I'm really wondering if like that's very intentional, because the one thing about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon is that it really does feel like the original, like The Walking Dead. Like the very first season feels a lot like the first season of The Walking Dead. You have Daryl in this place where a lot of things have went wrong and he's trying to figure out what's going on. Very similar to how, you know, The Walking Dead season 1 was with Rick. I just wonder if it's going to be kind of similar in that sense, especially since you're bringing Sophia back. And obviously in The Walking Dead season 2, Sophia's storyline was like the biggest storyline, you know, in that season. So I'm just really curious on how the similarities are going to play out here in this season here. And that's also another thing I wanted to talk about here, which is I really do feel like season 3 is going to be called The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, and that's it. I don't think it's going to be called The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol. I really feel like season 2 is called The Book of Carol because this season is going to focus on a lot of, you know, different aspects to Carol as well. Like, I know they were saying that the story is very 50-50, but it is more like 51-49. Like, Carol definitely gets a lot more of the story, and obviously if we're seeing Sophia's return and whatnot, all that makes a lot of sense. And I just think that the title, The Book of Carol, you know, maybe that makes sense then, you know, just for this season. Because I also think just in terms of the marketing for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, I feel like that could be a big reason as to why people are like maybe not even hearing that there's a season 2 coming out, right? Like, obviously, like, as soon as it's still way too early, like, we'll have to wait and see what the ratings are going to be. Like, I feel like that's going to really say a lot right there, is like whatever the ratings are for episodes 1, 2, and 3 and whatever, like, if they don't match season 1, if they're not like roughly the same, like, I expect the ratings to drop a tiny bit because that seems to happen all the time. It might pick up a little bit. It might be about the same. I don't know how the ratings are going to be here, but I'm just very interested in how calling it the Book of Carol is going to change a lot of, I guess, the season in general in terms of the ratings and all that, because I feel like people are more thinking that this is like a new show and maybe not The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2, and maybe people who really liked Daryl Dixon, you know, don't even know that season 2 is coming out here because the title is just so confusing. Because it's a common complaint, honestly. Like, if you look at what everyone has said about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2, everyone is saying, like, why is it called the Book of Carol? And like, yes, I understand you want to honor Carol and whatnot, but like, I think that you still could have had it the same title just to keep it a little bit more simple, and you're still giving her a big part of the story and whatnot. Like, I guess I get it because originally this was supposed to be the Daryl and Carol spinoff, but I think just the way it all played out, like, Carol wasn't there in season 1, you know, originally, and so this was more of the Daryl spinoff at first, and then it was like, well, what are you going to do for season 2, this and that, if she does come back? And I just think that, you know, you already named it this, it makes no sense to sort of give it another title. Like, The Walking Dead has never done that before, even like in the original series. Any other show, really, I don't remember there ever being like a hyphen there with like an extra title. And so season 2 is just going to be very weird like that. And I really hope that going forward for every season, they don't keep doing that, because I know that maybe they want to keep it all the same because the Book of Carol was, you know, for season 2. Maybe they'll call it something else for season 3. It's just going to confuse people. It's a title that everybody knows. And so that's why I do feel like for season 3, it's probably just going to be called that. And I think that we can just look back on season 2. And I don't think people are going to be that upset about the fact that it's called the Book of Carol if the story is really amazing. And I think we'll just look back at the title, the Book of Carol, as, yeah, that made sense, because for season 2, you know, the focus was a lot on Carol and we haven't seen her in quite some time. So yeah, it just overall makes sense, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I see that going. But definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.